Hello and welcome to Naad Education. In this series of lectures, we are trying to clear our basics of biology, and this is lecture 7 on endosymbiotic theory. So let's start. The endosymbiotic theory states that some of the organelles in today's eukaryotic cells were once prokaryotic microbes. This theory is about the eukaryotic cells and its origin, and the main thing in this is that earlier the eukaryotic cells were themselves archaebacteria like cells. They were a group of archaebacteria. You can see our previous lectures for the same. And the organelles that we see inside the eukaryotic cells, the structures that do different functions inside the eukaryotic cell, they are are supposed to be prokaryotic microbes from the past. So it would have happened, what would have happened is that some of the prokaryotic cells somehow developed an internal symbiotic relationship with the eukaryotic cell or the early archaebacteria. So they might have got into these cells and both were benefiting each other in some ways, and thus they later on became organelles. We will see more details about the endosymbiotic theory now. In this theory, the first eukaryotic cell was probably an amoeba-like cell that got nutrients by phagocytosis and contained a nucleus that formed when a piece of the cytoplasmic membrane pinched off around the chromosomes. So another property of the eukaryotic cell is that it has a nucleus with a distinct nuclear membrane. So the DNA material or whatever the genetic material is compartmentalized or is bound by membranous structures, making nucleus itself a proper organelle inside the cell. And it is different from the prokaryotes because the prokaryotes do not have a nuclear membrane. Some of these amoeba-like organisms ingested prokaryotic cells that then survived within the organism and developed a symbiotic relationship. So this is what we just stated, that some prokaryotic cells might have been engulfed by the earlier eukaryotic cell. It was not eukaryotic, it was something like an amoeba-like cell, but more precisely it was related to the archaea group, and some of them might have engulfed these prokaryotes and organelles would have been formed. These prokaryotic cells later on became organelles inside the eukaryotic cells. Mitochondria formed when bacteria capable of aerobic respiration were ingested, and chloroplasts formed when photosynthetic bacteria were ingested. One more interesting thing is that the mitochondria and the chloroplasts are the example of some such organelles. The evidence of that we will discuss later in the slide, but one such evidence is that these two organelles do have a small portion of their genetic material with them. So these are the organelles that carry a genetic material, a unique genetic material that is not that is a separate genetic material from what you see inside the nucleus of the cell, and it's a small one. It has lesser number of genes. They eventually lost their cell walls and much of their DNA because they were not of benefit with the host cell. Mitochondria and chloroplasts cannot grow outside their host cell. So a lot of genetic material, the DNA, was lost in these prokaryotic cells that were engulfed by the early eukaryotic cell, and a lot of DNA was also lost. So only a few genes are left, and these mitochondria and chloroplasts, they are obligate symbionts of these cells. They cannot survive on their own outside the cell. Now let's talk about the evidence of endosymbiotic theory. Chloroplasts are of the same size as prokaryotic cells. They also divide by binary fission and, like bacteria, have FTS proteins at their division plane. The mitochondria are the same size as prokaryotic cells and divide by binary fission, and the mitochondria of some protists have FTS homologs at their division plane. So these are some reproductive similarities between prokaryotic cells and the chloroplasts and the mitochondria. Mitochondria and chloroplasts have their DNA that is circular, not linear, just like very similar to bacterial DNA. Mitochondria and chloroplasts have their ribosomes that have 30S and 50S subunits, not 40S and 60S. This is again characteristic of, these are different and might have been related to the earlier prokaryotic cell. Oxygen begins to accumulate between the first fossil records of the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes. The interesting thing is that when mitochondria or the mitochondria like prokaryote entered the eukaryotic cell and it started to respire, or it might have been respiring aerobically from before. So aerobic respiration ultimately released oxygen, and if more of these cells started to survive, more oxygen got released into the atmosphere, and before that oxygen wasn't present in the atmosphere to that much of amount. So the increase in this oxygen is a very important geological time scale event that has changed the atmosphere, or you say the ecology of the planet. Several more primitive eukaryotic microbes such as Giardia and Trichomonas have a nuclear membrane but no mitochondria. Although this evidence is less convincing, it is also possible that flagella and cilia may have come from spirochetes. So this is another point. With this, we have talked about the endosymbiotic theory and the several evidences. Um, with this, we end this lecture here. And if you like the lecture, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. If you have any confusion, then you can request for notes in the comment sections. If you want any notes, you can request for notes in the comments section. And if you want have any confusion regarding this, or you want this video to be improved, you can let me know again in the comment section. Please share it with your friends. If you like it and subscribe it. Thank you so much. See you again.